Penny Sullivan nearly dropped her coffee when she smacked straight into a broad chest that smelled like cedarwood and coffee beans. "Oh my God, I'm so sorry," she blurted, looking up at the man she'd bumped into in the hallway of her new co-working space. He blinked, then smiled. "No harm done." Holy hell, he was gorgeous. Tall, dark-haired, sharp jawline, suit tailored like it was stitched to his skin. Penny felt her heart stutter embarrassingly. "I'm Penny." "Just moved into Suite 5A, the tiny one with the flickering light." "Simon Vale," he said, reaching out to shake her hand. His grip was firm, warm. "Nice to meet you, Penny. Welcome." She had no idea she'd just shaken hands with the CEO of the building's parent company. Penny had moved into the shared office space in Midtown Manhattan after finally launching her freelance design business. Her budget was laughable, but the little corner office had natural light, and the shared kitchen had free granola bars. It was a win. Every morning she passed Simon in the hallway. Sometimes he was on his phone, sometimes he just nodded and gave her a quiet, "Morning, Penny." She thought he might be another freelancer, maybe a lawyer or one of those financial advisors who always had multiple phones. She never imagined he was the one who owned the entire building. "Morning, Penny," Simon said again a week later, holding the elevator for her. She stepped in, clutching her laptop bag. "Morning, Simon, big day." He glanced sideways. "Always." She laughed nervously. He smiled again. And just like that, it became a routine. Morning greetings, elevator rides, passing smiles. Penny didn't think much of it. She was too busy trying to land new clients and keep her bank account from flatlining. Simon, on the other hand, noticed everything, the way she bit her lip when she focused. The way she talked to the receptionist like they'd been friends forever. The way she always picked the granola bar with almonds and left the others for everyone else. There was something about her that stuck. He didn't usually notice people like this. He couldn't afford to. It distracted him. But Penny was different. She didn't try too hard. She didn't flirt. She didn't even seem to know who he was, and that was exactly why he couldn't stop thinking about her. One afternoon, Penny was in the kitchen, pouring herself lukewarm coffee when Simon walked in. "Don't drink that," he said, moving toward the machine. "Why not? It's not poison, right?" he chuckled. "Barely counts as coffee. Let me fix that." Before she could say anything, he pulled out a key from his pocket and opened a side cabinet Penny hadn't even noticed. Inside sat a sleek, silver espresso machine that looked like it belonged in a luxury hotel. "What the are you hiding a secret coffee stash?" "I am," he said, already making her a drink. "Don't tell anyone, I'll lose my reputation." "Reputation for what, exactly?" she asked, raising an eyebrow. He handed her the cup, being low maintenance. She took a sip and gasped. "This is amazing. What is this, Italian coffee?" He gave her a look. "Of course," she laughed again. "You sure you're not secretly rich or something?" Simon gave a small smile. "Something like that." They stood there for a moment, sipping their drinks, then she asked, "So what do you do, Simon?" There it was. The question, he could lie. He'd done it before with people who only saw the money when they found out, but Penny was different. She didn't care about labels. She didn't seem to care that his watch probably cost more than her monthly rent. "I run a company," he said carefully. She nodded, unfazed. "Cool, must be nice not to have to pitch yourself every 5 minutes." He tilted his head. "Pitching yourself isn't always a bad thing." She blinked at him. "It is when you get ghosted by 3 potential clients in 1 week." He paused. "What do you do?" "Graphic design, mostly branding and packaging. I'm trying to go full-time." "And you're here alone," she shrugged. "That was the budget. I couldn't afford a bigger office." "But hey, I've got a window." He smiled at her honesty. "That's a start." The door opened behind them and someone called Simon's name. He turned, nodded once, then looked back at her. "Let me know if you ever want help with anything. I know a few people." She gave him a curious look. "You've got connections in design." "I've got connections in everything." She laughed. "Good to know, mystery man." And just like that, she disappeared back down the hall. Simon's assistant came in as Penny left. "Sir, the meeting, I'll be there," he said, watching the hallway for a beat longer. That evening, Penny sat at her desk, reviewing mock-ups, when a knock came at her open door. She looked up, surprised. "Simon," he held up a small, black box. "Peace offering." She blinked. Did we have a fight I forgot about? He stepped inside and opened the box. Inside was a brand new stylus pen, the kind she'd been eyeing online for weeks but couldn't afford. Her jaw dropped. What, how did you even? I saw yours was cracked. Figured you could use a new one. She hesitated. You didn't have to, I wanted to. She stared at him. You're kind of a mystery, you know that. He looked at her, serious now. Is that a problem? She shook her head slowly. No, just means I still don't know what you're hiding. Simon's voice dropped slightly, not flirtatious, but real. Maybe I want you to find out. She didn't know what to say to that, so she just nodded, holding the box in her hands, heart pounding. After he left, Penny closed the office door and sat down slowly. Who the hell was Simon Vale? And why did she suddenly feel like her life was about to get a lot more complicated? Penny didn't see Simon the next morning, or the one after that. She told herself it didn't matter. People got busy. CEOs, if that's what he really was, probably had calendars stacked with meetings and flights and important things that didn't involve chatting in office kitchens or dropping off expensive design tools for near strangers. Still, she found herself glancing toward the hallway whenever footsteps echoed past her door. By Thursday, she gave up pretending she didn't care and buried herself in a rush job for a boutique skincare brand. The client needed a full packaging redesign in 72 hours, and her bank account needed that deposit even more. She worked straight through lunch, barely noticing the sun dipping behind the buildings outside her window. At 6, her screen froze mid-edit. She groaned, thumped the mouse, and muttered, "Don't do this to me right now." A knock snapped her out of it. "You in here?" came Simon's voice. She turned in her chair, startled. "Hey. Didn't think you were still around." He stepped inside, a messenger bag slung over one shoulder, blazer gone, sleeves rolled to the elbows. "I've been in and out. You look like you haven't moved all day." Client deadline. "The usual?" He set the bag down on the windowsill. "And your computer's staging a revolt." It picked the exact moment I was finalizing a label to freeze. "I think it's personal." He walked over without asking and crouched beside her desk. "Mind," she shifted aside, "be my guest. But if you break it, I'll have to invoice you for emotional damages." He tapped a few keys, then reached down and unplugged a small adapter she hadn't noticed before. The screen flickered, then returned to normal. "External display driver was overloading your RAM." She blinked. "You know your way around computers." "I know my way around a lot of things." She studied him for a second. "What can't you do?" "I'm terrible at karaoke," he said without a beat. "And I don't have the patience for Sudoku." That made her laugh, and he stood, brushing dust from his slacks. "I was on my way out," he said, "but I figured I'd check in." "Thanks for the rescue." He hesitated, then nodded toward her half-eaten protein bar. "Have you had real food today?" She tilted her head. "Define real." "Anything that didn't come prepackaged or from a vending machine." She shook her head sheepishly. "I meant to order lunch, I forgot. I'm going to dinner, come with me." Her eyebrows lifted. "Like dinner? No." "A boardroom conference with stale sandwiches and bottled water," he said dryly. "Yes, dinner." She hesitated. "I can't afford, I didn't ask you to pay." "Simon, Penny," he interrupted, voice steady. "It's food, not a contract." She considered that, then slowly closed her laptop. "Fine, but if this place has cloth napkins, I'm ordering dessert." 20 minutes later, they were seated at a quiet table in a restaurant tucked above a bookstore, one of those hidden places that didn't need to advertise because people in the know kept it exclusive. A server brought fresh bread and poured still water into crystal glasses. Penny ran her fingers over the linen tablecloth. "This place feels like it should only exist in movies." Simon unfolded his napkin. "It's one of my favorites, the chef trained in Lyon." She blinked. "You sound like someone who reads wine lists for fun." "I don't read them, I own one." She looked up sharply. "You own a wine list?" "I own the vineyard the list is printed from." Her mouth opened, then closed. He glanced at her. "Too much?" "No," she said slowly, "just a little unexpected." Simon leaned back. "You want to know what I actually do?" "I mean, I won't Google you," she said, meeting his gaze, "but I'd be lying if I said I wasn't curious. I started a tech company in college. It took off. We expanded. I stepped back from daily operations 5 years ago and moved into private equity. Which means I buy companies that are flailing and fix them, or I fund startups that show promise. And you work out of this building because I own it. He said it like he was telling her the sky was blue. She stared. Wait, you own the building? He nodded. You said you just run a company. I do. I also run this one. She leaned back, stunned. Wow. So this whole time, you've been walking around like a regular tenant while secretly playing Monopoly with actual properties. He smiled faintly. I like being close to the projects I invest in, and I'm one of those projects. His eyes didn't waver. Not yet, her breath caught. The server arrived with their entrees, breaking the tension. Penny looked down at her plate, chicken glazed in something citrusy and delicate, resting on a bed of grains she couldn't pronounce. She picked up her fork and tried to focus. Halfway through the meal, Simon set his utensils down. Why did you decide to start your own business? He asked. She chewed thoughtfully. I was tired of being told I was replaceable. He didn't respond, just waited. My last job, I worked for a boutique agency, small team, I thought I mattered. Then they lost a major client and I was the first one cut. No notice, no severance, just a box and a locked login. That's brutal. Yeah, she said, voice tighter than she meant, but honestly, it pushed me to do what I should have done earlier. He nodded once. I respect that. They didn't talk about work again. Instead, they drifted through topics, childhood stories, the weirdest food they'd ever eaten, books they'd abandoned halfway through. Penny couldn't remember the last time she'd laughed so easily with a man who wasn't trying to impress her. When the check came, she didn't even pretend to reach for it. He paid in cash, crisp bills folded carefully. Outside, the air was cooler. The city pulsed around them, soft and golden under the street lamps. He walked her to the subway entrance. She hesitated at the top of the stairs. Simon, he looked at her. This was nice, he nodded. It was. She didn't move, then he stepped closer, not touching her, just close enough that she could see the gleam in his eyes. I don't do this often, he said. Dinner, care, about people I don't have to, she swallowed. And you care about me? I'm trying very hard not to. Her breath caught. And how's that going? Terribly. She gave a quiet laugh, then turned toward the stairs. Good night, Simon. He didn't follow. Good night, Penny. She descended into the subway, heart thudding so loud she could barely hear the train. Above her, Simon stood for a long time before finally walking away. The next time Penny saw Simon, it wasn't in the hallway or the kitchen or the elevator, but through the glass wall of the main conference room. She'd stopped to refill her water bottle and happened to glance to the right. There he was, seated at the head of a long table, surrounded by sharply dressed executives. His posture was relaxed, but his presence filled the space like gravity. One man leaned forward to speak. Simon didn't interrupt, but when he finally responded, the entire room shifted their attention as if pulled by a string. Penny turned away quickly, feeling like she'd peeked through a door she wasn't supposed to open. Back in her office, she couldn't focus. She kept thinking about the way he'd looked at dinner, the way his voice had dropped when he said he was trying not to care. She'd spent the weekend pretending it was nothing, that the flutter in her chest had been wine or flattery or the thrill of being noticed by someone so completely outside her orbit. But now she couldn't push it aside. A knock interrupted her spiral. Before she could answer, the door creaked open. Simon stepped in, no blazer, a folder tucked under one arm. Busy? He asked, trying to be. He walked to her desk and placed the folder in front of her. She raised an eyebrow. What's this? An opportunity. She opened it. Inside were branding guidelines, mock-ups, and a brief that looked professionally prepared. He waited until she'd skimmed the first page. A new hospitality group is launching a boutique hotel line. I'm backing them. They need a full identity package, logo, signage, digital assets, the works. I gave them your name. Her heart tripped. What? They're expecting a pitch next week. You'd be one of 3 designers presenting. She looked up sharply. You didn't just hand me the job. That wouldn't be fair, and you'd never accept it that way. Penny stared at the folder. This is huge. I know, she hesitated. Why me? Simon's expression didn't change. Because I've seen what you can do, and because they're not looking for safe. She closed the folder slowly, careful not to let her hands shake. I'll need to clear my schedule. I figured. He started to leave, then paused in the doorway. Penny? Yeah, I'm not offering this because I'm interested in you. Her stomach dropped. I'm offering it because you're good. The other part is separate. She nodded once, unable to speak. After he left, she sat in silence for several minutes. Then she stood, locked her office door, and began reworking every current project in her pipeline. She pulled 3 late nights in a row. She ran on black coffee and cold noodles and listened to the same playlist until the songs blurred. For the pitch, she created something bold: color palettes drawn from vintage travel posters, typography that hinted at old-world charm with modern edges, textures that made you want to touch the screen. The morning of the presentation, she wore a navy blazer she'd borrowed from her sister and heels that pinched her toes. The meeting was on the 23rd floor in a sleek glass boardroom that felt like the inside of a luxury jet. She stood across from a panel of executives with polished smiles and polite expressions. Simon wasn't in the room, and she was grateful for that. She spoke clearly. She didn't rush. She let her work speak for itself. When she finished, no one clapped, but the nods were genuine. She rode the elevator back down to her floor with her spine straight and her nerves humming. She didn't see Simon again that day. 2 days later, a wrapped box arrived at her office. No note, no branding. Inside was a leather-bound sketchbook, the kind artists drooled over. Tucked beneath it was a single business card from the hotel group. On the back, in black ink, was one word: congratulations. She stared at it for a long time before setting it down. That evening, she found Simon on the rooftop terrace. She hadn't known the building had one until she'd followed the sound of a cello drifting through the stairwell. The sun was melting into the horizon, painting the skyline in gold and fire. He was alone, leaning against the railing, suit jacket slung over his shoulder. "You knew I got the job," she said, stepping up beside him. "I suggested they'd be idiots not to choose you." She glanced at him. "Was the cello part of the celebration or just coincidence? I like music after meetings, helps me think." "You always hide on rooftops." He looked at her. "Only when I want to avoid being congratulated," she laughed. "Then I won't say thank you." "Good." They stood in silence for a moment, the city buzzing beneath them. Then she asked, "What's the catch?" He turned to her. "There isn't one. You're giving me work. You're spending time with me. You're making it very hard to stay grounded. I'm not trying to make this complicated. You already have." He stepped closer, just enough that she could feel the warmth of him. "I don't want to be your boss, Penny. I don't want to be the guy who buys your loyalty." "Then what do you want?" He didn't look away. "A chance with you." She folded her arms. "That's risky. I could crash and burn." "So could I." She studied his face. "You're not used to wanting things you can't control, are you?" "No," he said quietly, "but I'm willing to try." She didn't answer right away. She looked out over the city, heart hammering. "If we do this," she said finally, "we do it honestly. No favors, no shortcuts, no secrets." He nodded. "Agreed. And if it all falls apart, then it falls apart beautifully." She turned back to him, exhaling slowly. "Okay." He didn't touch her, but the way he looked at her made her feel like she was already being held. Penny walked back down the stairs that night with her head full of noise and light. She didn't know what came next, but for the first time in a very long time, she wasn't afraid of it. Penny stood in front of the tall mirror inside a penthouse suite she never thought she'd step foot in, let alone be invited to. It was Saturday evening, and the city lights were already glowing against the glass walls behind her. She straightened the lapels of her sleek white blazer, rented, not bought, and tried to steady her breathing. Somewhere behind her, Simon was finishing a call in another room, his voice low but clear. She hadn't planned on coming. When he told her the investor gala was optional, she'd intended to skip it. But then the hotel project's creative director, who now called her by name and sent her thank you pastries, asked if she'd be attending. And Simon had sent a car anyway. "I've never been to one of these," she said when he returned, sliding his phone into his pocket. "I feel like I'm about to walk into a Vogue photo shoot." Simon gave her a quick once-over, not the lingering kind, but the appreciative kind that made her feel seen rather than scrutinized. "You look exactly right." He offered her his arm, and she accepted it without hesitation. The gala was held in a private wing of the Metropolitan Museum, closed to the public and filled with music that seemed to float rather than echo. Penny had never been in a room with so many black tie suits and designer gowns. She recognized a few faces from magazines, others from startup headlines that had once felt like distant dreams. Simon introduced her to people with ease, never once calling her his date or his guest. Instead, he said things like, "This is Penny Sullivan. She's behind the branding for the Marlowe Project, and Penny's work is redefining the visual identity of our hospitality division." Each time, heads turned, eyes studied her, and no one questioned why she was there. Later, while sipping something citrusy she couldn't pronounce, a woman in a navy silk dress stepped beside her. "You're the designer he mentioned in the last board meeting," she said. Penny blinked. "He mentioned me." "He doesn't usually name names," the woman replied. "But yours came up twice." Penny tried to hide the flush rising in her chest. "Well, that's flattering," the woman smiled knowingly. "He doesn't do flattering either, he does facts." Simon found her shortly after, offering her a plate of chocolate-covered fruit. "I saw you talking to Alina. She said you name-dropped me. Twice." She exaggerates. It was once, and it was relevant. They found a quiet corner near a sculpture installation where the music softened and the crowd thinned. "I didn't think I'd feel comfortable here," Penny admitted. "But you do." "I feel like I'm supposed to be uncomfortable, but I'm not. Is that weird?" "No," Simon said. "It means you belong." She set her glass down. "Can I ask you something? Anything? When did this change for you? When did I stop being just someone you passed in the hallway?" He looked at her for a long moment before answering. "When you asked if I was secretly rich, and didn't care what the answer was." She laughed, then caught herself. "Wait. That was the moment. It was the moment I knew I wanted to tell you, which doesn't happen often." Penny studied him, noting how different he was in this space. Still composed, still controlled, but softer somehow, less guarded when he looked at her. "I've been trying to figure out what this is," she said. "What we are." He stepped closer. "You're not a project, you're not a distraction. You're someone I think about when I should be thinking about 100 other things. I've never dated someone like you. I've never wanted to date someone who challenged me in all the ways you do." She hesitated. "This doesn't scare you." "It should," he said. "But it doesn't." Penny glanced around. "Then what happens now?" Simon reached into the inside pocket of his tuxedo and pulled out a small, flat envelope. She frowned. "Is this another job?" "No." He handed it to her. Inside was a reservation confirmation for a weekend in Montauk. "Oceanfront Cottage, 2 nights. Why? Because you've worked nonstop for weeks, and because I want to see you outside of fluorescent lights and deadlines." She stared at the paper, then up at him. "You planned this." "I thought you might say no," he admitted. "But I wanted to try. I don't have any vacation clothes." "I already called your sister. She's packing a bag and sending it to your apartment." Penny blinked. "You called my sister?" She was surprisingly enthusiastic. She shook her head, laughing now. "You're terrifying when you plan things." He leaned in slightly. "Then you should know this isn't the only thing I'm planning." She tilted her head. "What else? You'll see." That night, they didn't return to their own apartments. They stayed in the penthouse, not because it was easier, but because it felt inevitable. In the morning, Penny woke to the sound of rain against the windows and the smell of coffee already brewing. She padded into the open kitchen where Simon stood barefoot, stirring something on the stove. "You cook?" she asked, surprised. "I make 3 things well, this is one of them." She joined him at the counter. "I don't even know what your favorite color is." "Green, but not the bright kind, the deep one like old forests." "Hush," she said. "Mine's orange." "I know," she blinked. "You do? You always pick the orange folder when you're organizing, even if there's a blue one right beside it." She stared at him, stunned. "How long have you been watching me?" He looked at her. "Long enough to know this isn't temporary." She didn't say anything for a moment. Then she reached for his hand. "I don't want it to be." Later that week, Penny found a lease renewal form slipped under her office door, but next to it was a second envelope, unmarked. Inside was a key card and a note in Simon's handwriting. "Suite 10C is vacant. It has better light and a working heater. Your rent's covered for the next year, no strings, just support." She sat down, overwhelmed. Then she looked at the key card and smiled. 2 months later, she was standing in a sun-drenched office 3 times the size of her old one, with her name on the door and 3 new contracts on her desk. Simon walked in carrying lunch from her favorite cafe, and she barely had to look up to know it was him. "You're early," she said. "I missed you," she grinned. "I just saw you this morning. I know, still missed you." He leaned over and kissed her, slow and certain, and in that moment in a corner office she never expected, with a man she never saw coming, Penny realized she hadn't stumbled into a dream, she'd built it. And he'd fallen in love with her along the way. It was the first Saturday in May when Penny placed the last framed print on the wall of her new office. Her fingers lingered on the edge of the mat, grounding herself in the quiet thrill of standing inside a space that was now entirely hers. The furniture was custom-built, her logo etched into the glass on the door, and her calendar held consultations booked out for the next 3 months. As she stepped back to admire the final touch, a large canvas of abstract brushwork in burnt orange and deep green, there was a soft knock. "Come in," she called. Simon entered without hesitation, his tie loosened and sleeves rolled up. He held a flat box in one hand and something concealed in the other. "Just finished?" he asked, eyes scanning the space. "An hour ago," she said, brushing her palms together. "Everything's finally in place. No more folding chairs, no more tangled cords," he extended the box. "Then this is perfectly timed." She opened it to find a sleek brass nameplate engraved with her full name and title. Creative Director, Sullivan Design Group. Her throat tightened. "You really didn't have to." "I know," he said, and placed the second item, a potted olive tree, on the windowsill. "But you needed something alive in here." Her eyes warmed. "You're dangerously close to turning into a sentimental executive. Only with you." She placed the nameplate on her desk and sat down, watching him survey the space like he was memorizing it. "I met with the Marlowe team yesterday," he said, finally turning back to her. "They're expanding the line. You'll have full creative control." Her brow lifted. "You're not involved." "I'm stepping back. They don't need me anymore. You've made them more valuable than I ever could." She tilted her head. "And what are you going to do with all that free time?" "Figure out how to keep up with you," she laughed under her breath. "Good luck." He crossed the room and leaned on her desk, his tone shifting. "They're asking me to speak at the Global Venture Forum in Tokyo." 3 weeks from now." Her heart paused. "That's a big deal." "I usually say no, but this time I'm considering it." She folded her arms. "What changed?" "I want you to come with me." She blinked. "To Tokyo?" "There's no pressure. It's not a vacation, but we'd have time. We could extend the trip, go somewhere after." "Like where?" "I don't know, Kyoto or maybe somewhere with beaches. You've never been to Bali, right?" She looked at him, stunned. "Are you asking me to go halfway across the world?" "I'm asking you to let me be part of your world, wherever it takes you." He said it calmly, without showmanship, but it struck her with the weight of something permanent. She rose from the chair, stepped around the desk, and took his hand. "I can't promise I'll always be easy," she said. "I get tunnel vision. I question everything. I'm not good at letting people help." "I don't want easy," he said. "I want you." She leaned in and kissed him, slow and full of certainty. When they pulled apart, he rested his forehead against hers. "So, is that a yes to Tokyo?" "That's a yes to everything," she whispered. They left the office hand in hand, the final rays of sun spilling across the floor behind them. 3 months later, Penny stood barefoot on the edge of a private villa's infinity pool in Uluwatu, her hair damp from the sea and her skin glowing from the breeze. Below, the cliffs dropped into turquoise water, and the air smelled of jasmine and salt. Simon approached with 2 glasses of something chilled and citrusy, handed her one, then sat beside her on the warm stone. "You were right," she said, gazing out at the waves. "Bali was the right call." He lifted his glass. "To spontaneous decisions. To terrifying leaps," she added. "To building something together," he said, softer now. She turned to him. "You know, I was terrified when I first met you, not because you were powerful or successful, but because you saw me before I even saw myself that way." "I didn't see what you were," he said. "I saw what you could be. And somehow you keep becoming more." They toasted, and she leaned into him, her head against his shoulder. Later that night, after dinner under lanterns and music drifting from a nearby villa, Simon took her hand and pulled her gently into the garden. "I wasn't planning on doing this here," he said, "but I don't think I can wait." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small black box. Penny froze. He opened it to reveal a ring, simple and elegant, with a single oval diamond set in a thin band of platinum. "I don't want to spend another moment wondering if this is temporary," he said. "I want every version of our future. The chaotic mornings, the missed flights, the impossible deadlines, all of it with you." She stared at the ring, then at him, and a laugh broke from her throat, bright and full. "You're serious?" "I've never been more serious in my life." She wrapped her arms around his neck and kissed him before he could even finish the question. "Yes," she whispered against his lips. "Yes, yes, yes." They didn't need an audience. There was no spotlight, no grand announcement. Just them, barefoot in a moonlit garden on the edge of the world. 1 year later, Penny stood at the top of a staircase inside a villa on the Amalfi Coast, wearing a gown made of silk and light. Below, guests waited on a balcony overlooking the sea, where white flowers arched over a stone altar. Simon stood there already, his hands folded, his eyes never leaving the door she would walk through. When she finally stepped forward, the music began, soft and warm, and he smiled, not the cool, unreadable smile he once wore in boardrooms, but the open, radiant one he saved only for her. Their vows were not rehearsed. They were spoken from memory, from truth, from 1,000 quiet moments that had led them here. "I choose you," he said, "not just today, but every day, in boardrooms and backstreets, in storms and stillness. I choose you." She looked up at him, eyes bright. "I never imagined a life where I could have both the dream and the love," she said. "Then you walked into the hallway with your perfect coffee and ruined everything. And I've never been more grateful." When they kissed, the sea roared behind them and the sun dipped low, blessing the horizon in gold. That night, as the celebration faded to laughter and candlelight, Penny sat beside Simon on a terrace overlooking the cliffs. Her hand rested over his heart and his fingers traced idle lines along her spine. "We made it," she whispered. He kissed her temple. "No, we just began," and together they watched the waves carry their future to shore.